Hello, this is a Bechstein Model S grand piano. That's 143 centimeters long, 4 foot 8.5 inches long. The shortest grand that Bechstein make, and one of the shortest baby grands that you can buy, certainly one of the highest quality short ones. Came in with this rather attractive stool that is exactly the right height for it. So I'm really grateful to get this piano into stock. Model S Bechstein is one of the very best, very short grands you can get. In England, there's lots of London Bechsteins which are similar length, and they're made in England, so they're quite different from this really. Let's have a look at the casework, and we can see that it's a mahogany colour, and it doesn't seem to be too much fading or damage for that matter, though it does need reviving. It's a little bit dull all the way around, but integral pretty much so. Let's have a look all the way around and on the top lid, because you can see on the top lid where it's been held back. Let's first of all go around the whole side, and maybe a little bit more bleached on. Not really, it's the same colour I think, it just needs reviving, and the top needs reviving here as well. If we look at it under here, we can see that this is the original finish. It's pretty much perfect actually, and here you can see it's sort of dull and also got very doesn't feel good to the touch. This is smooth and that's not smooth. That's obviously had something standing on there, but I think we can make it good without repolishing, though we could French polish the whole piano if you want something very special. Obviously we can. It'll change the colour, it'll be slightly lighter probably. We'll try and show up more of the grain on it, as we've mentioned before. It's got the original Bechstein key CB, which is nice to have. The music stand desk felt could do with changing, though you can see that it doesn't look too worn, and indeed if you look at the pedals, well, this pedal's beautifully sloping down. Just mention the legroom is 61.5, which for a small grand is excellent, and those are 5 centimeters tall and sloping down, which somebody mentioned recently they don't like sloping down pedals, but I like them because they don't wear on the edge. And some Bechstein uprights and other uprights, you find the edge is worn here where it's not been sloping, so that's helpful in that respect. And you certainly low enough, 5 centimeters high, if you want to put caster cups under and raise the height even more, so it wouldn't be a problem for tall people this either. See the original retailer Rushforth and Draper, Liverpool, their names on a lot of pianos, sold a large number, and the key tops, well, they're all there, but some of them come off and been stuck back on. You can see there's a line in the middle here. We're going to have to try and improve that. We could replace the key tops. For export we often do that, it's necessary, but they're in good condition generally. A little bit on the yellow side, but they need buffing I think, so that'll bring a bit more white out as well, but it won't go completely white. So there's the Model S. As I mentioned, the majority of short Bechsteins are made in England, called Bechstein London. You see that on the soundboard. You can identify it from that. It says Bechstein London on the soundboard. Here's the serial number. That dated at 1937. Excellent year for short grand pianos generally. Of the top manufacturers, they made some of their best. And if you see the fatness of these bass strings, that's a key to it sounding good even though they're very short strings. And in fact we can compare that with I've got a Bluthner here, which is good, excellent instrument. Let's play bottom C here, which actually is a semitone flat. We'll look into that in a minute. Well, I'm actually going to play the B because it's more like the same pitch, and it's obviously stronger sound. This is 165 centimeters, so a much longer piano. Back to the Bechstein. So it's a very respectable tone. We'll compare other ranges in the piano with the Bluthner in a minute, but obviously it's a very short piano. I haven't got a short piano the same length to compare it with, but I can assure you this is one of the very best you can get. So look at the cosmetics here. Well, everything looks a bit rusty. Now we could find that we're going to bake strings, but interesting enough, the person who supplied us with the piano said they tried pitch raising some of the notes and they hadn't broken, strings hadn't broken so far. We'll look at that in a second. Very dirty as well, obviously needs cleaning up. I'm not sure what that is that's been placed there. Maybe some form of, I don't know, just occurs to me it might be some form of protection against moth or something that they put here. container. I may be completely wrong there, but if you recognise that, I'd be very grateful to know. The whole piano doesn't seem to have any moth, and again, the construction of the piano is very encouraging, really. For a short grand piano, you don't get better. Well, the piano is extremely flat. See that A425.2 wants to call it a G sharp. But some of the notes have been pitch raised. It surprised me when I went through here. It's almost the same note, so it's almost a semitone flat, and they've tried pitch raising some of the notes and not broken any strings. I would normally lubricate here and then take the string down and back up again, just to try and avoid any breakages there might be. There's no strings been broken in the past. I'm reasonably confident we won't break any. The bass string particularly, if they're very expensive, so obviously if we want to, they've got agraffs here which right throughout the piano. That's a sign of a very high quality piano. And the string length, I wouldn't mention that, but if you look there, the strings come as close to the agraffs as possible. They can't come too close obviously, but that shows good string making. So we will pitch raise almost a semitone. I want to go up to A444. See there, A440. But the note I'm playing is actually B flat. So it's a massive pitch raise. I'll do that just to help me to assess the piano to see whether we want to recondition it, which I think we do, or fully restore it. The actions are high quality, small grand German grand action, as high quality as you can get really. You notice I've raised up these two hammers here. They're 51 is the hammer blow, and that's about 45, which I like the feel of. It can be 45 to 47 normally, but it's a bit notchy on the roller. The roller is this there, you can see the jack pulling out of the roller, and I think it would be best to change the rollers before we do any other regulation. Let's have a look at the roller. You can see on here it's just a bit flat, but we'll just change the rollers. We could change hammers, shanks and rollers, but there's no need to. I've mentioned many times that we do that, but there's hardly any wear on those hammers, so I just think refacing them, and the tone is already good, and then changing the rollers, that's what we'll have to do. These hinges are important too, but such a high quality manufacturer that these hinges are very tight anyway, and then not too tight, so I don't need to lubricate the hammers. We do need to lubricate here though. The keys, some of them are a bit stiff, so we'll lubricate the keys. They should go straight back down. Some of them do, so that'll alter the key weighting slightly, as we'll see in a minute. The key weighting's a bit high. Otherwise the action's in extremely good condition. It's quite dirty, but once the team gets going on that, I just want to show you the other adjustments, although we will actually change the rollers before we do the fine adjustments. First thing you need to decide on is what key dip you want. This is an 11mm key dip measurer. I usually favour 11. This is about 10 to 10.5. We'll see what the team thinks, but I think 10.5 is probably very good on this small piano. And if you're going to have the hammer blow at 45 instead of 47, then that would work very well. Now the second main adjustment is the capstan here. This regulates the height of the hammer. So if I turn the capstan to the right, then the hammer will go up. If you watch the hammer, there we are. I turn it to the left, the hammer goes down. So normally you have to raise the height of the hammers. It's sunk a bit. As I say, we'll change the rollers, or some people call them knuckles, before we do that, because that will automatically raise the hammers up anyway. Now once you've decided on your hammer height, you can adjust the set-offs, and that is how close the hammer gets to the string before it pulls back. So if you look at the hammer there, it gets as close as possible, but it must have a safety margin. Sorry, it's very out of tune. There we are, and it's very notchy, so we need to change the knuckle really before we do everything else, but that's a bit on the close side I think, so it's got to operate properly. So let's take that down a little bit more, so we get it as close as possible with the safety margin really. Then we can regulate the spring. That's this screw here. If I push this hammer upwards, this is C, that's about correct. Comes up as fast, but so that it doesn't really notice too much in your fingers. That's slightly faster than ideally it should eventually be, but I want it to be good for the next 20 years or so. And if we look at the B here, it's not really very fast at all. It's too slow. If it doesn't work at all, then if you raise the hammer height up, you'll find that the jack doesn't go underneath again. So the spring must be tight enough so the jack goes underneath. So I'm going a bit fast with this, but I just wanted to show you a bit of regulation. By the way, these are waxed instead of having graphite on, which they normally would nowadays, but Bechstein and other makes did a lot of waxing instead, and it's very acceptable, works very well. So that's coming off about right. So that's the spring, and then the last of all it would be the drop screw here, and we just adjust that. That's the height it finishes off at. So if we play B and C here, you'll see that C ends up quite a bit higher, so after it's checked it goes back up and stays near the string. So it's better repetition if it stays closer, and B is slightly further away there. So that was adjusting this screw here. Last of all, again, there must be a margin of safety there. Last of all, you regulate the back check here by pushing it backwards and forwards. It's best to do that last, because if it's if the hammer needs to go reasonably low down so you can test the spring. If that spring's not working at all as I lift it off, I'll just get that spring working for you so you can see what I mean. So there we are, let's adjust the spring. Let's turn it once, see what happens. So let's have a look at it now. And now the spring's working a bit too much, so I need to turn it back down again. So that's just some of the main regulation, which I hope will be helpful to someone. That's the capstones, then the set off here. You may have a different order for your technician, but that's the sensible order, I think. And then the screw here for the spring, the drop screw, and last of all you would do the back check. In this case the checks are checking at about the right height place anyway. You don't want it to be too high up, otherwise the hammer wears the top of the check. Here's the assessment sheet summary. The Bechstein Model S, that number is the case number underneath, by the way, the other number, and on the cheeks of the piano. So 140997, 1937, mahogany, original. Ivories need to be made good or replaced. And there's the length of the piano, incredibly short, 4'8.5". So if you want a very short piano, you won't get a better one. Shortest Bechstein, made in Berlin as opposed to England, where a lot of the short Bechsteins are made. Retailers there in Liverpool. And let's have a look at the rest of the summary and the main work. So decided on a short hammer blow of 45. We'll see what the team says, if they sometimes override me once they get going on the action, but that's what I think it should be. But we'll obviously want to get the touch like a new piano, that's the goal. A nice duet stool to match, lubricate definitely, and change the rollers. I think that's an essential bit of work. And don't need to replace hammers, which is encouraging. Pitch raise is massive. I'm going to pitch raise the piano now just to see if any strings break. That'll help me to decide whether we're going to fully restore, which we could do. In other words, change the strings and so on and so forth, and be very, obviously we want dearer if we do that. I didn't mention here that lubrication will alter the, it's slightly heavy, so lubrication will help there, and possibly need to be a bit of weighting, but I don't think so, because we're not replacing hammers either. So I hope that's helpful. I'm going to pitch raise now, and we'll see if any of the strings break. The pitch raise has now been completed. I've set the A at about 444, just under, as you can see there. So now I want to compare it with another piano we have in our storage area, which is a Bluthner Grand. Now bear in mind this piano is 4'8.5". The Bluthner Grand is 5'6", I think. So let's have a listen. So here's Bluthner Star 4A. I think it's 5'5" long actually, and just coming to stock. Similar age piano. So that's a Bechstein Model S grand piano, 143 centimeters, 4'8" inches, 8.5 inches long, which is extremely short. The shortest Bluthner, for instance, is 5 foot, or 4'11" rather, sorry. So this is an excellent short grand piano, and now I've studied the piano, I'm very impressed with the design of it. It's a lot different from the London Bechstein, which is much more common. I'm not quite sure if that is 5 foot long. I think it probably is. But this is oozes quality, really. Wherever you play the piano has a delightful tone. It sings beautifully, and the action is very fine. You won't get a better action on a short grand piano than this. I'm certain about that. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much for listening. If you're interested in the piano, please do write to us, info@robertspianos.com. Whether you'd like us to repolish it, if you want it as it is, obviously it'll be much less expensive. The casework doesn't really cry out for being repolished. There's no desperate fading. It's pretty integral. It needs tidying up, maybe a week's worth tidying up, or a bit less than a week, compared to French polishing, which is 70 hours. So either is possible. Cosmetically, I think we also need to work on the keys just to perfect them. It's a delightful action to play. So do please write to us, info@robertspianos.com, if you're interested. Thank you very much for listening. I meant to say that we do have the option to try pianos out for a month or more. Usually it's 10 months trying it out, and then if you want to buy the piano, you pay the difference for what you paid for trying it out, for renting as we call it. So please look at our rental section for more information about that. Thank you very much.